All right, everyone. Welcome to Community Conversation. Today we have head coach Brian Zancewicz. Sorry, it's just Zancewicz on the Community Conversation today. I'm super pumped about this because, Brian and I are the ones that kind of started Prototype, and we were the first ones in doing everything. So this is like a special community conversation. I'm sure everyone's going to be listening to this. But Brian, thanks for being on. I think it's like the 38th or 39th episode of the Community Conversation.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. So, I know your story pretty well, Brian, because I've known you for 10, 11 years now, but I don't think everyone at Prototype, even our coaches, might not know your story. So would you mind just kind of, starting there? How did you get into the fitness industry? What was your journey into this industry? Everyone's is different, and yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So long story short, my stepfather and my mother have been together for, I don't know, 30 something years now. I was probably 9 or 10, right? And that's when Big Al, Big Al. We met Big Al a bunch of times.
Fanny pack.
We had to fanny pack Big Al. So
if you're that big, you can wear a fanny pack.
You can do whatever he wants. The scariest man alive right there. But he was a competitive powerlifter, right? So a competitive powerlifter, and he trained a bunch of people, right? He trained people for powerlifting, essentially. And about 9 or 10, they obviously got together, and long story short, I would spend all my free time with him as he trained people. He's a prison guard as well. So he worked 3 to 11, sometimes 11 to 7. Got the middle of the day open. So in the summer times, vacations, I had no place else to go. I'd hang out with Big Al, and we'd go down to the gym. And he'd have people come in, he would train them throughout the day, including myself. And be quite honest with you, I was the biggest pain in the butt alive. I used to cry. I don't want to work out. This sucks. You're stupid, Al. Long story short, I look back at it 30 years, and that's the best thing that anybody ever had done for me, was to force me to kind of move my body and exercise. He didn't care if I was the best powerlifter in the world or best whatever, right? But he knew the mental state for to feel better about yourself, you had to move your body and work out. And at that time, I was extremely overweight. I was a fat, angry kid, right? And you can sum it up with that, right? And I remember this one time, actually several times, he used to make me run upstairs, right? He'd bring me out at night, and when he got home, he'd be like, all right, Brian, you got to run up and down these stairs. You got to do it 50 times. And I remember him forcing me to do that. I've been running and crying and just putting on a show, right? Dramatic. And I'll never forget this. I was coming down, I was crying. He's like, good, Brian, it's good. Cry a little more. It burns calories. Keep going. And basically, that was it. And here I am. But again,
did you rebel against the crying? Because you're like, I don't want to burn calories just to spike them. So you're like, I'm gonna stop crying. Because that would be the biggest parent. That'd be the biggest parent hack ever for I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine that there's these secret hacks that all you clever parents out there use on your kids.
Well, no, so it's a win-win though, right? So again, it burns calories, and you stop crying and just do it, and that's what you're trying to accomplish, right? You're trying to get this person to do what to be good for them, and they don't want to do, right? And we kind of deal with that quite a bit here, right? Actually, not here necessarily, but in previous jobs, I had previous gyms, people come in and they want results, and they don't want to put the work in. Here, we don't necessarily have that problem. We deal with very driven, like-minded people here, which is refreshing. But I'll continue on with that, right? So fast forward, I'm a competitive powerlifter. I've been doing this I hurt my back a few times, kind of get out of it by the time I graduate high school. And again, long story short, in those times, off and on, some, significant substance abuse problems, right? So deal with that, kind of come out of that, right? Kind of change things around, change my lifestyle. Then I never revert back to that, right? Another go of substance abuse and bad behavior and destructive patterns, things like that. Run into some problems here and there. Again, periods of dysfunction as I get a little bit older. Right now I'm in my early 20s, and I'm not even 21 yet, and I've already quit drinking several times, right? Quit drinking, quit doing drugs several times, right? So this is all before I'm 20 years old. work a few jobs here and there, odd jobs here and there, but continue to like to exercise and be interested in these things, and you know, and having the hope of one day maybe, you know, being a trainer, being a coach, right? So work construction for a couple of years, hate every minute, every day of it, right? And I remember one day I was working for myself. I was working down Rhode Island and driving home, and like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this. So I called my friend who was a trainer at Gold's Gym in Millis, right? Millis is right down, I think it's 109. I think it's down in that area, right near like Sherburne, Dover. And I was like,
How old are you now?
I was probably, at this point, I was probably 22, right? So I skipped forward. I left a lot of area out there because there's a lot to that. I'm trying to just get to like where I'm at now, and probably 22, 23, right? And I've cleaned up at this point, right? I stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs. I kind of, you know, I'm not as destructive, mentally still kind of, but like not as outwardly destructive, not as violent, right? I called him, I go, Mike, what do I have to do to become a trainer? He's like, all right, so you got to start off with getting your certification. I'm like, okay, I'll start with that. So I get like an online certification. Fast forward probably a month and a half later, I show up in Millis Gold's Gym, right? You walk in, right? Really nice people work there. Here, oh, Brian, you're here. Here's an application, boom, boom, boom. We can get started right away, right? I'm like, oh, perfect. They give me a shirt that says trainer on the back, and they look out to the fitness floor, which is actually a pretty good sized gym too. Like, here's your shirt. Now go talk to people. I'm like, really? That's it. Like, yeah, go talk to people, get to know people, and, you know, and go from there. And from that day on, I quit my job and I was a trainer, just sent off into space. And Mike will tell you this, and most coaches and trainers will tell you this: when you first start as a coach or trainer, you don't get paid. So this is all unpaid floor time. Me walking around trying to talk to people, to get them, to convince them to come have me help them. Fast forward a few months later, I practiced this and I'd known I need to do this and get better at this. So I just did it because I didn't have any choice. And again, I'll give you a side story too. Me and Lisa are going to get married in a few months. And, you know, we're getting married, and I'm like, hey, Lisa, I come home and I go, hey, I quit my job. I'm a trainer now. This is one day, right? This is one day. I quit my job as a trainer. She's like, oh, that's great. And she kind of went with it. And I'm like, that's it? That's all. All right. I thought you were going to be a little more resistant. She goes, and she's the type of person, like, if you're not happy doing it, don't do it. All right. You know, and now she'll tell you now, she was obviously a little nervous at the beginning, but again, look, fast forward now, I'm almost 41 years old, and we're here at CrossFit Prototype, and there's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather work, and there's no group of people I'd rather work with, to be quite honest with you. Again, there's many more side stories in there. There's a lot of different directions, but again, that sums up. That's the big picture right there of how I got here, and go into a little bit how I met you. And obviously, I know I listened to your podcast a few weeks ago, Mike Scott, right? So early 20s, I'm working in the gym, right? I come across this guy's name's Don. You met Don. Yeah, you met Don, right, Mike?
We did Fight Club with Don.
Yes. So Don Crowd, big influence in my life right there.
Hold on. So this was at Gold's Gym or before Gold's Gym?
Actually, fast forward. I got another full-time job at Global Fitness in Stowe, Massachusetts.
Yeah. So how long were you at Gold's Gym for? You're 22-year-old, first training job, Gold's Gym, Millis, and then you were there for
probably there a year. I was probably there a year. Then we had moved. So we lived in Milford at the time, and then Millis is like the next town over.
Oh, got it. Yeah, you and Lisa got married, and then you moved to Milford.
Yeah. No. Yes. We moved to Milford, right? And then me and my mother had a house. We owned a house in Lancaster, Mass. That's Route 2 in the middle of nowhere, right? So we moved out there, and it was an hour and a half to drive to Millis, and to try to drive an hour and a half to catch a 5 a.m. appointment for somebody became unmanageable, right? I'd get up at 2, 3 o'clock, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So eventually I switched jobs. I worked in Stowe. It's called Global Fitness in Stowe. Good friend of mine still to this day. His name is Dave Bundy. Gave me a shot, right? Full-time gig, insurance, all that stuff, right? So like a real job, if you will, right? So, you know, same thing though. You walk around and talk to people, and by now I'd become good at it, right? I can talk to people. I can get engaged and get people, really have me help them. Right. And there's one guy in there, his name is Don, right? Real nice guy. Not the most intimidating fella, but you hear stories about him, you hear whispers about him, like, oh, it's Don. He used to be a professional fighter. And he was. I think he had retired at that point, though, but he had been a professional fighter for years.
And like early stage, like UFC, right? Was he like early? Yeah.
Bare knuckle, early stage.
Bare knuckles, yeah.
The only thing you couldn't do was poke someone's eyes and fish hook. Those are the only two rules. Oh. The groin, the throat, whatever. Anything went. And he had been involved in this for years. Right. So I was intrigued. I was like, oh, wow, Don. He's like, yeah, in my previous life. He's like, you know what? I do a lot of jujitsu now. I do some of the mixed martial arts still, right? But, I'm not really as angry as I used to be. I'm like, oh, that's great. Well, he had invited me down one day to roll, right? So when you do jiu-jitsu, you roll, right? So invited me down and instantaneously hooked, like instantaneously, right? We went probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I remember turning bright white a few times and having to excuse myself and going to the room to throw up, right? No, this is somebody that's been active their whole lives, right? They've lifted weights, they play football, basketball, whatever it may be. And I come down here and it was an eye-opening experience to roll with this guy who is not much bigger than John, right? Right, a guy that's not much bigger than John, right? And remember him just twisting me sideways, up and down, and not having any clue what's going on. Yeah. But I thought to myself, this is great. I want to do this. So again, fast forward a few years later, we're legitimately going just an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, punching each other in the face for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I thought about
Is this in Stowe?
Yeah, this is so. And we actually had a training facility in the next town over in Maynard. It's probably 5 minutes away. It was in an old office building that
that's right. That's right. I did Fight Club with you guys.
Bill Duggan's father had he was a property manager of what used to be Data Terminal. It was an old like building that had like office space in it. And basically, we fought in between cubicles, right, with mats down on the ground.
And you get ringworm on those mats.
But I still get it to this day. It pops up all the time.
So gross.
That's on my arm right there. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a fighter. This is what I'm going to do. And then fast forward a few years, I have my son Marshall, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not. That's not the life for me. And then again, kind of jumping around a little bit here too. That's how my brain operates. I brought Mike Scott, a mutual friend of ours, down to the facility to roll with us.
When was this now? So it's a year.
Yeah, it's probably, what year is it now? This is probably.
It's gonna be like 2010, 2011, maybe.
It's actually probably 06, 07.
2007.
07. No, I'm sorry. I'm down there 06, 07. Fast forward 2008 when Boston Sports Club, right? I started training this guy, Mike Scott, and he had always been interested. He'd done Taekwondo. And he's like, oh, Brian, like, I want to train with you. I want you to get me in better shape. Blah, blah, blah. And I heard you do these things. I'm like, yeah, Mike, absolutely. I do these things, and I'd love to have you down sometime. But he's like, okay, but I want to make sure I get in shape first, right? I'm like, all right, Mike, whatever. I know that's not how it works, but I'm like, okay, I go along with it. We trained for a few months, and then one day I'm like, you know what? All right, Mike, I think you're mentally and physically ready to come down with us. Comes down with us. Same thing. First day, hooked. Can't get enough of it. Like, look forward to the next time we come in. So we go on it for a few months, right? We're training back and forth. I train him at 5 a.m. I get promoted to the fitness manager. And at this point, I think you had been there for a few months already, Mike. Were you at BSC for a few months already when I got hired?
Yeah, 2010, 2011, yeah.
So James Mahoney, a mutual friend of ours, I moved to a different job and I took over as a fitness manager. So I no longer trained at 5 a.m. I'm like, oh, we got this trainer, Mike Collette. I think you should train him. He's a great guy. He's a good trainer. Train with him. And then did Mike get you down? Did Mike convince you to come with him?
He trained with, he didn't train with me. He trained with Zach.
Oh, that's right. Because you trained Dr. Dan.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. He trained with Zach. And somehow you guys got to talking and he came down.
Yeah, that was like the networking thing that I was talking about, the networking group. And then that's when I came in with you guys, which was okay. I know exactly what you're talking about with the feeling like white and feeling like you're gonna puke. I didn't get the same hooked into it like you guys did. It was more terrifying for me because I had zero martial arts fighting experience, but it was like an incredible workout for sure. I was more interested in the GHD machine that was on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, this is great, man. This is good. We had rings set up too. We had the whole setup right there.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike brings you down, right?
Yeah.
Not hooked right away, but like, oh, this is fun. This is great, right? And I'll bring it back to the same moment, right? You guys were driving home. I was driving home at the same point, and you guys called me like, we want to start a gym. We want to start a CrossFit / mixed martial arts gym. And then what? 9 months later, signed some papers, and now we're here, right? Like, that's a big gap too between that point and where we are now. But like, that's pretty much how it happened. Oh, and I'm sorry too. Oh wait, rewind to 2008. Our mutual friend of ours, Bill Douglas, like, you gotta check this. And this is at the point where where I'm actively in the not taekwondo, jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts. He's like, you like this stuff? You really love this stuff. Check this out. It's called CrossFit. I'm like, oh, I'll check it out. So this is probably, again, rewind. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around so much. Probably 07, right? He's like, check this out. I went online, I checked it out, and I watched a few videos. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to check this out. I signed up for the certification. I was there probably a month later in Vassal, Maine, getting my level 1 certification. This is at the point too when CrossFit wasn't necessarily mainstream or anyone even knew about it, right? So I'm up in the middle of the woods at the state police barracks, again, in the middle of nowhere, Vassal, Maine. It gets right outside of Waterville Valley. And I remember going in there, and they had since changed how they do it, but right away, it was go right away. I remember they're screaming at us. I remember like using a kettlebell, getting out, and this lady just smacking me in the ass to extend my hips. And she must have did it 50 times. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get away with this back where I live and back where I work out, but I like what you guys have going on here. Right? I kind of like the methodology. It's just like, go short, intense, faster workouts. And again, I was hooked from there, man. And again, that's what we do now. It's 2021. We've been here since, 2012, right? So it'll be almost 10 years.
Yeah, nine years. We're going on 9 years in
July.
12 days.
Yeah.
9 years. September 1 basically is the 9-year anniversary.
We were
So
here.
What was that?
We were here inside, right, tearing shit down before, right? It was I remember coming in here with your stepfather Bob and just tearing shit off the walls. I think that was
we were ripping off the panels on the walls from the children's clothing store, which those original panels are still on the front of the wall where the chalkboard is now. But those things weighed those were maybe 4x6, 3x5, something like that. Giant, we had to take them off the wall. They weighed 100 pounds each, throw them all away. And yeah, that was all around the entire place. There was a wall at that last pillar in the back of the gym. There was a wall that separated it. There was a small room back there. There were the changing rooms. There was 2 changing rooms that we had to destroy. And lay down all the mats over all the carpeting and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that was a lot of work. I think the most work was pulling all those mats in on that 1,000,000-degree day with whoever drove the it was how many 1,000, it was 1,000 of those 4x6 stall mats that forget who drove them over here and dumped them off on the ground.
Donnie Nicole Moore's stepfather. Donnie.
That's right. Yeah. And they they were like, how do we get these off the bed of the truck? There's weighs 1,000 pounds. And they just used one of those, I remember what are those, forklift things?
Yeah.
Using one of those, and it was so heavy that it tilted it down. And then I remember you just use it to kind of scoot it off the bed of the truck, and it smashed all over the ground. We had to pick them up. These things don't break. So it's a rubber mat. They're folded over. It doesn't matter. Pull them in. I think we got them all in there between me, you, and I don't know, one other person in like 30, 40 minutes. I think I remember timing it. I'm like, we're gonna do this for time. It was exhausting.
Garrett showed up. Garrett showed up with his truck. We were dragging him in. I think we got like half of him in.
Yeah.
And we were dragging to the front. He's like, I got this truck. Why don't you just put him on the bed of my truck and I'll drive him to the front entrance. You pull him off right in, it's gonna shit. And we're like, oh, Garrett, why are you so smart? That's when
working smarter versus harder. That was not in our DNA back then. It was all excitement. No. So so just so everyone knows, so you have been training like in this like personal training, group training, like fitness training specifically for, by my calculation here, like 19 years.
Yep.
Almost still be 2002 is when you got your job at Gold's Gym. 2003, 2004, you moved to Stowe, Lancaster. You and Lisa got married. I'm curious I want to ask you about how you and Lisa met in that. 2008, you went to BSC, and then 2012 Prototype, and that's where we are now. And it was like 2011, I think. It was like when you were like the fitness manager at BSC. So you mentioned like that, like you quit your construction job in like 2002 and then started training at Gold's Gym. Like what made you make that like decision outside of you hating doing the construction, but like what like led you to, I want to do this? Cause you said you had like experience doing powerlifting, like Big Al is like a trainer, powerlifting trainer. Like what was connect those dots. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I didn't really have any clue what I was going to do when I graduated high school. I remember wandering around town. What the hell am I going to do? And in fact, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between there. And basically the only time I was happy when I was at the gym, right? Exercising. And I'm like, oh, this is a really positive, one of the only positive aspects of my life right now. Or one thing that I really enjoy that I know is going to help me. And I knew construction wasn't. People that I worked with weren't, I'll say it, they're bad people, right? I worked for some bad people that didn't really care about what you did as long as the job was done. And I knew the way my personality was, I probably wasn't going to be alive for that long, right? Because this is when I was in like the throes of addiction, right? Hiding it, like any and all the bad shit like you think of, like that's pretty much where I was at, right? And I cleaned my act up a little bit at that point, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this. Like I know and we talk about this sometimes too in our meetings. I'm a very black and white person, and sometimes that's a bad thing, but in this case, it was a very good thing. Very black and white. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is what I'm gonna do. And I threw myself into it. I got every publication, every book I could possibly get my hands on. I memorized like glossary terms or definitions of things. And I just threw myself into it because I knew if I wanted to make a living doing this, that's what I was going to have to do. And that, again, they brought me here, gave me opportunities that I would never in my wildest dreams ever thought of. And it's funny how things work. You put the effort in and opportunity comes, right?
How long have you been sober for, Brian?
Probably.
Or when did you stop? Like, you made that decision to just change your life.
So by the time I was like about 16 to 22, 23, I'd probably been sober. 16, 17 years from that, 16. So you might have to fast forward those timelines a little bit more. Might have been, again, I have some very, very foggy areas of my life in my early 20s. For maybe 16, 17 years, maybe a little bit longer by now. And honestly, I don't even remember at this point. That's a whole different podcast right there. As far as like when I really stopped drinking, really stopped the self-destructive behavior. Yeah, so I'd say 17, 18 years, maybe, something like that. A little fuzzy. Wow. Yeah. I don't miss it either. I'll tell you that, man. I don't miss that. And again, at that point too, at 22, 23, when I had stopped, I'd already been 7 or 8 years off and on doing real bad shit. And you know what the funny part too is, like, doing all this bad shit, I'd have moments of clarity and I'd make it to the gym, I'd exercise, I'd do things for myself, and that would just revert right back to bad behavior and doing things that are not, that people shouldn't do. And I'm convinced too, if I had stayed on that path, I'd be long gone by now. I remember a few instances where I'd wake up and I very rarely had a hangover because I just didn't stop drinking. Right, I'd wake up sometimes violently shaking. I remember sitting down in a diner with one of my old bosses. Yeah, it's a real not a good dude. I couldn't pick up a spoon. I was like, I'm not even gonna eat. I can't pick up the spoon. It's gonna sit here. And we go back to the job site. I get in the back of the car and get into another 30 pack or a 16-ounce honor proof, whatever it may be that day. And it's funny too, because like when you do these things, I remember driving down the street, drinking, doing whatever, and like this is gonna end. And I remember not caring. too. I remember driving, drinking, and like half blacked out driving on the road, being like, oh, this is gonna end poorly. It's either gonna end me dying or I'm just gonna stop. But right now I don't really care. I'm just gonna continue on my day. And this went on for a while. That's not cool.
Wow. Was like, and I didn't mean that for this to kind of go down this route, but I appreciate you being so open and talking about it. Was that like the hardest thing for you to do, like ever in your life, was to make that decision, or just to change your path? Like, was that, when you boil it down, was that, because it sounds like it's incredibly hard.
Well, you know, it wasn't, because long story short, I was in a real bad way one night, and I vaguely remember calling out. It was, I don't know what time it was, but I was all sorts of, excuse my language, effed up. And I remember calling me, like, yeah, I need help. And I hung up the phone. He had no idea where I was. I was actually house sitting for my father at the time. And my mother might've mentioned that I was there, and he had left work. He worked, I think he worked 3 to 11 that night, and he picked me up that night. And that was it. That was the last time I ever drank right there, was when he picked me up. He brought me back to his house and essentially locked me in the house for a few days. Like, he wouldn't let me out of his sight the time off of work. He's like, I'm not gonna get my sight the next 4 or 5 days until you clean this shit up. And at this point too, I had broken up. Long story short, I had broken up. Me and Lisa had broken up because I was all sorts of messed up, but no one should be around that. And he locked me in the house for a couple of days, and I remember shaking, sweating, throwing up, and like, this is no way to go through life. And he basically gave me he's like, here's the choice, Brian. You can continue doing what you're doing, probably live in a cardboard box and die probably pretty quickly, right? Or you can stop and have whatever you want. And I was like, you know what? It's a pretty easy choice right there. And I stopped. And now I have 2 healthy kids, a wife, a house, like, good job, like, good people that I work with. Like, there's no place I'd rather be. And basically, I was given the choice. Like, I was blessed enough to have somebody like Big Al in my life that helped me straighten this out. And again, here I am, man. Like, cut the shit. Black and white, stop. Like, sometimes black and white's not great, but sometimes that's what you need to do. That's what you need to be given the choice. Either you can live or you can die. It is that easy. Or for me, it was. I can only speak for myself. And again, like, I enjoy helping people, and I enjoy Jeremiah, a very good friend of mine, and friend of yours too. Like, he'll joke sometimes that I'm his life coach, and you know, and anything that I can do to help somebody, you know, again, because you gain wisdom through experience, right? So I've experienced a lot of the bad emotions and a lot of bad stuff, and you know, it's anything I can do to help somebody. If I can share some of the wisdom that I've had, that I've gained through experience, if I can help other people with that, then I'm all for it, man. Because I've had many people help me throughout my life, that really didn't need to, didn't have any business to, or didn't have to, right? And again, what goes around comes around, right? The more you help people, the more good things are going to happen with you. And again, it's gonna spread. And you know this, I'm a big energy guy, right? So what kind of energy are you putting out there for people? Are you putting the energy out there to help, or are you putting the energy to take, right? And if you put the energy out there to help, it comes back around, man. Again, we have a lot of great people in this facility that, you know, at the drop of a hat would do anything for you, right? And that's a testament to you as well, Mike, right? It's you're the piece that holds it all together, right? I get a little wacky sometimes. I get off course, and you're gonna put me back on, right? Same thing, your brother, right? I look at your brother and I'm like I know if I talk to your brother, he's gonna give it to me straight, and I appreciate that a lot. John's a truth teller. He doesn't tell lies. So two big influences in my life here, John and yourself, Mike, have helped me substantially. And I spend more time with you guys, I think, than I do probably anybody else. Or not as much now, but before, it'd be 14 hours a day with John and Mike. Manage to not strangle each other. So
yeah, I don't think John and I would win that battle against you, since you have yeah, I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I already know that. I'm not gonna even try that.
The funny thing now too is, like, as you get older, you get more mature. I'm the passive, non-violent person. Funny how things change over the years.
It hibernates in you, though. If it needs to come out, I'm sure it could come out. If you poke the bear, if you poke the bear. How did you? So, not to like switch gears, because I do appreciate you just talking about all that. I feel like if you guys, whoever's listening right now, if your fucking eyes aren't watering, I mean, I don't know what you've been listening to, because this is just an incredible story. Again, I know all this stuff, but it was just, it's really incredible to kind of hear this, Bri. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing this. And but again, not to just switch gears so abruptly, but how did you and Lisa meet? And for everyone that's listening right now, if you know Brian, you have to know Lisa, because she's done like over 2,000 classes at Prototype. I think she rarely misses a 5 a.m. And if she misses 5 a.m., she's probably coming at 6 a.m. Like, you know what I mean? Just because whatever. But how did you guys meet? Like, what was that like? It sounds like she was a integral component of you kind of making this like transition and decision to get on a path of like sobriety. Like, how did you guys meet?
This is my favorite story to tell. So, again, you graduate high school, like I didn't really know what to do. I worked some construction jobs. I also worked as a waiter, right? So I worked at a local restaurant in the town I grew up in, Maynard. Got in a little bit of trouble there. I'm like, I need to find a different job in a different town. I need to get out of this town. So I remember driving through Framingham one day, and I'm sure a lot of people remember this restaurant. It's called Bugaboo Creek. I was driving down.
Creek.
Dude. I was driving and I saw this big banner on the roof. It said "Now hiring," and I'm like, "All right, cool, man." So I pull in, I walk in, I'm like, and I think I had bright white hair at that point too. So I made sure I had my hat on, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna be on the up and up. I'm gonna keep my shit together here." So I walk in, I talk to the manager, like, "Oh, I'd like to apply to be a waiter." He's like, "Oh, all right, here's your application." I sat down, I filled it out. Fast forward a week later, they call me. I go in for orientation, right? All right, so I started as a waiter there in Framingham. I'm floating through life at this point, right? I'm just kind of like, I'm living day to day. I'm like, I don't know what's going on the next day. Like, I barely remember what happened the day before. Again, I'm there for about 6, 8, 9 months, maybe something like that. And yeah, this girl starts. Her name is Lisa. Lisa, now Zancewicz, at that time, Hoagland. And I remember talking to her, and you know,
Brad, I think you might have cut out for a second.
I was kind of drawn to her. I don't know what it was.
I think you cut out for like 1 second. I think the internet might have just been a little tweaky. What did you say?
Oh yeah, pretty messed up and like in a shell, right? This shell of a human being too at this point. And I remember being like, I remember talking to him. I'm like, well, I remember telling him this is exactly what I said too. I go, I'm probably not going to call you, but if you want to call me, you can call me, right? And we'll go from there. So she calls me. She calls me one night, and I was like, oh, thank you for calling me. Like, this is great. And we went out on a date. And I think it was the day before Valentine's Day. It was February 13th. And I'm like, you know what? I really like this girl. So I remember sending her like a teddygram. Remember this today? You can send like teddy bears like over the phone. They're hearing a commercial for it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna call this company. I'm gonna have them deliver. I'm gonna have it delivered. So I think I looked in the white pages or something. I looked up the last name, and I was like, oh, Hope Framingham. This is it right here, 105 Everett Ave. So I sent it to her. And I remember I talked to her a week later, and because I had given it some time, I was like, I'll give it some time. I talked to her a week later, and she's like, did you send me this teddy bear in the mail? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did. And then we went on another date, and now we're married. That's pretty much how I met her. She was in school, Framingham State, to become a teacher or finishing her degree in education. And again, I'm just this degenerate kind of floating through life, and somehow, some way, we're together now. And again, we're a house, 2 kids, and like things are pretty good, man. Things are good.
Met at Bugaboo Creek. You made her call you. You liked the first date. You sent her a teddygram. Went on a second date, and then you got married. That was that's the short version of that story.
That's a very short version of the story.
And now you have two kiddos.
Parents again. I'm gonna go on a tangent, but it was the best thing that happened. It's like, Big Al was great, but we didn't do a whole lot for like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. That's not something we did like as a family unit, right? And I remember going over there, and like they did it, right? I remember going over for Easter. You guys have Easter dinner. You guys celebrate people's birthdays and like celebrate Christmas. Like, this is crazy. So it actually like introduced me to like family structure. What are quotation marks that normal family structure was. So like that changed my life too, right there. And I'm thankful to this day. Her father, who God rest his soul, passed away a couple of years ago, was one of the greatest guys I've ever met in my life. I can't say enough good thing. I get coming, I'm this idiot kid, I don't know, 18, 19 years old, got bright white hair, and I'm going out with his daughter. But he accepted me with open arms, and like I'll never forget that. Like that was another big turning point in my life. Shit, somebody gave me a chance.
That's awesome, man. I love hearing that. So like, then now just switching gears one more time. I know you got your level 1 CrossFit in 2008. Yeah. You mentioned in the certification process, and that was like early stages of CrossFit. That was like before it was even really on the radar. And I think it was probably like here. And then we kind of got into it like in like kind of here. So you kind of were like in this area here. Now it's like, it's well off where it should be. Having like been doing CrossFit, learned CrossFit, have like been involved in it for so long, probably done one of the first like level 1s in Massachusetts, or it wasn't even Massachusetts, it was in Maine, you said, right? What have you seen? Like, what have you noticed in regards to like what we do at Prototype, and like how that's even changed over the years in 2012 since we started to now in 2021?
Come around full circle, in my opinion, what I see. Again, a lot of labels on things, right? Things are labeled CrossFit, things are labeled this, things are labeled that, when it really comes down to effective exercise. I look at CrossFit, how it began, right? And you remember, I think you even had a t-shirt. Remember Pukey the Clown? Remember Pukey the Clown? So there's this clown, right? And like it was like a badge of honor that you throw up after these workouts, or you get rhabdo, or you'd be like, oh, this is great. And when you're younger, you're like, okay, that's cool, I want to do that. But then as you mature and get older, like that's not sustainable, right? You can't push yourself like that for an extended period of time and expect to have longevity in either this business or working out. Like your body would just break down. And what I've noticed with CrossFit over the last 8, 9, 10 years is that it has come around full circle. it's come around to more of a holistic approach to be like a healthy lifestyle, nutrition, just the packaging has changed. Because when it comes down to it, again, it doesn't matter what you call it. You call it CrossFit, you call it Mike's Garage Gym, effective exercise. And we're lucky too with the way the model works is that Mike did the program, right? He started doing the programming, right? And each affiliate is individually owned, run, and operated. So what we do here is much different than what they do at like CrossFit San Diego or San Francisco or Tallahassee. I think Mike was on board with the change more than most places, right? So Mike, I know he has a background in sports medicine. His degree is in exercise science. So I think from the early stages, he actually had the idea of making this more of a holistic approach. And it's almost like CrossFit followed what he was doing, even though Greg Glassman probably didn't know you for, a hole in the head, right? So we've been doing that here much longer than some of the other CrossFits, some of the other places, I think, as far as like trying to keep people healthy and make this more of a holistic approach as far as like longevity and how you're going to be in 30, 40 years rather than what you look like in 2 or 3 years. And I think that's paid high dividends for the product that we put out there and how we help people, right? When it comes down to it, right? We want healthy lifestyles, and it doesn't have to be bleeding and throwing up on the ground every day like it used to be, right? There's a time and a place to push it, right? But it's not all the time, right? It's not.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah, I always thought, I think this is where our heads were like at the same. I always thought puking was stupid. Like the idea of like you need to work so hard to throw up. I thought that was stupid. I thought the idea that like, I guess glamorizing or putting, getting something like rhabdomyolysis on a pedestal was just absolutely just insane. It's just kind of like, you look at the evolution of like we talked about earlier, like UFC, from bare knuckle fighting to like those rules, and now the structure that it has now. It started here, but this is where it is. And I think everything goes through the evolutionary process of like trial and error. And like at Prototype went through trial and error, still go through trial and error. We're like, you don't have everything figured out. But like you mentioned, like from the early stages, like, we were using foam rollers. We were actually doing warm-up drills, not doing a Metcon to warm people up for the Metcon. You know what I mean? Like, having like strength with conditioning basically every workout, not just now it's not every day is the same, but like, from the premise of it, not overcomplicating things, too much. And, having different, like start, even just like our virtuosity or one-on-one sessions to get on-ramp people. We started doing one-on-ones to on-ramp folks to group classes before many gyms. I think that is now the model. But before, we started, I think we did it for like a year, maybe the first year, because it was only you and I doing all the classes. Like we had group, called it elements at the time. We had group elements classes. People would come in at a certain time, do elements class. They had to do, I think 4 of those elements classes or something like that, 3 of them. And they were like, Tuesday was this one, what Thursday was like, it was the same workout those days. So you had to make sure you hit those days. And then I think having the flexibility of doing those one-on-one on-ramp or virtuosities of fundamental sessions, we couldn't have done that without more people, right? Because it was too hard, because we were doing, and I think I did like the 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock class. You might have come into the 9 o'clock class. We had 10 o'clock class, we had a 12 o'clock class, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30. It was like, it was crazy. We started with so many classes. I think at one point we had a 2:30 class, and it was just like,
you just kind of did it, right?
Yeah, you try to please everyone. I think one of the, I don't know what your thoughts are. I think one of the things that we made a big mistake is on the early stages is that we tried to fit everyone into the same, the same protocol, regardless of like what we thought what would have been the best thing for them. So instead of one-on-one training, like you should go to group, it was like convincing people to go to group. It's so good to go to group. And I think because we're so excited about, and still are, excited about CrossFit and group classes and the influence that like the environment that you're in has the impact on you. But that environment is Prototype in general, not just the environment of the group classes. And I think once we kind of figured that out, like, okay, like we got to go back to our roots of doing one-on-one training and prescribing what's the best thing for folks, not just saying, hey, we do CrossFit, come do CrossFit. And I think a lot of gyms are still out there doing that, and they're doing an injustice. It's an injustice to their clientele, to their members, to have them come in, say, hey, great, thanks for coming in here. You're going into group classes, as opposed to like understanding what's important to them, what their experience is, like, understanding if they need more accountability, less accountability, they need something more specific, and then directing them to a path. Like you mentioned, like maybe doing nutrition before you do group classes, maybe, doing one-on-one training, maybe doing a separate program like Joe's, strength or barbell program, opposed to going right into CrossFit classes or group classes. So yeah, I'm right on that same page with you, brother.
And what I'll tell people too, and I'll get this question a lot, and you've gotten this question too. And most recently, a friend of mine, her name is Claudia Ramirez, super nice lady. She comes in, she does some Thrive here and there, she's in CrossFit classes. She understands the importance of exercise, and her son is moving back to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to finish college. And she's asking me, she's like, Brian, like, there's a bunch of CrossFitters out there. Which ones should I send him to? I go, Claudia, this is an actual conversation I had a few weeks ago with her. I go, check out the websites. Is the website clean? Right? Does it look good? And it's not always about looks, right? But if you have a clean website and things work on it, that shows they're probably thorough on what they do at that facility. And go, second, and this is the most important one, do they have an on-ramping process? Right? Because what that also tells you, if they have an on-ramping process, they care about how people move, and they're not just concerned about shoving people into class, right? So if they have a clean website and they have an on-ramping process, then you're probably at a legitimate CrossFit box or gym, whatever you want to call it, right? And she checked it out. She went in there, and then that's where he's going to be. They found a box that had it. They're very thorough on what they do, and that's what you look for, because you don't want to just shove people in something like just exactly what you said, shove people in a box, right? It's got to fit for them. And I think one of the best things that we started here, and you brought this up, is the prescriptive model. What's appropriate for that person, right? Because we can help everybody here. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're blind, you have no legs. We can help anybody, everybody. But what's going to be appropriate for them? What's going to make the most of their time and their resources? And I think that's where we differentiate ourselves a while ago, actually, it comes down to it. And I hate to toot our own horn, but I will. Like, I think we do things, not perfect, but I think we do things a lot better than most places do. And that's why we've had the sustainability, because these places come and go. You have to kind of redirect and kind of reorganize and reprioritize things and how you can help people. And if you have the help first mentality, that's the goal, right? Help first. Like, other things will take care of themselves. You have to be thorough with it, you have to follow through, but things will take care of themselves if you have the help first mentality. And that's, I can very easily say all the coaches that we have in here now have the help first mentality.
That's awesome, man. I agree 100%. I wanted to get into these Spitfire questions, but I wanted to ask one more thing. Like 2020 was weird with like COVID and all that sort of stuff. It still is weird, and maybe it's going back to some degree of like what it was like, during like the pandemic and whatnot. Like, what have you, like, just from your perspective, you're the head coach, like, what is your perspective on what like Prototype is now, like in 2021, after kind of going through, 2020 and all that sort of stuff? Like, what do you think has changed the most, or what do you think is different, if anything is different?
I think there's a greater appreciation for it now than there was before, right? And human nature is that you don't really always appreciate things until they're gone, right? So I think there's a greater appreciation for the community, and across the board with everything, coaches, the clientele that come in here. I think there's just, in my opinion, there's just a better feel in general, because again, something was taken away. We couldn't come in here, and it was great. We did virtual, and that kept people going. That kept people's sanity, right? Because really, this exercise is for your body, but I think it's more for your brain than anything. And I think the pandemic and the division and things that are happening in this world, I think this is a spot here at Prototype where really, like, again, we follow the protocols, we do what we're supposed to do, the CDC, the government, but no one really cares about what your background is, what your religion is, what any of that stuff is, right? We're all in here kind of making ourselves better, right? And I think it's a safe spot for people, and full well knowing too, the black and white stuff, right? That we're going to do the right things for protocol and the safety measures and the cleaning. But I think it's brought a greater appreciation for what we do, right? For exercise in general too, right? I think it's magnified things, and it's made, and there's always some good to be taken out of something as bad as it's a global pandemic, right? And that's what I might put my thumb on that, right? People have a greater appreciation for spending time with people, exercising, being around like-minded people, right? And this mask, I'll wear this mask every day if I have to. It means never having to sit in my house for 6 months again, right? And I think people feel the same way. They're willing to do what they need to do to keep everybody safe and keep coming.
Yeah, I hope that, the folks out there that haven't been exercising and have, this has been a wake, when you look at the silver lining, hopefully it's like a wake up call to help get people a little healthier and be more, be preventative. Health fitness is a preventative, health, strategy. It's not just get on meds and deal with it as it comes. It's do the hard work, in the short term that gives you the best long-term results. I think everyone's looking for that, short, quick, easy thing that's going to give you that short-term benefit opposed to that long-term benefits. Like, these lagging indicators, right? Putting the time in the gym, working out, focus on nutrition, doing those sorts of things like that consistently, your health and your improvements in your health would be a lagging indicator of all that work that you put into it. So yeah, I'm right there with you on that, man.
More for your mental state than anything else. Again, the byproduct is that you look better, you physically feel better, but hands down more important for your mental state than anything else. That's the reason why Lisa comes here at 5 a.m. Monday through Friday when it's negative 10 degrees out in January. Like, you want to stay at home, but like getting to the gym, like doing these things, the nutrition aspect and how that adds to the value of your time here, right? It's understated sometimes, and we really put an emphasis on that. But it's still the level of importance of these things. It cannot be stated enough. Mental state, man. You do it for your body, but it's better for your brain. Shit, man.
Yep, 100%. I want to get into the Spitfire round, so you should know what this is at this point. But 3 questions, and the first 2 are kind of there's a couple options, a couple things. So the first one is, I think you'll like this one: favorite movie of all time, favorite TV show of all time, and what are you currently binge watching? That's one question with 3 parts.
Oh, it's easy. Guess Step Brothers, favorite movie of all time. Awesome. Show of all time, British baking show.
British baking show.
I love that show, man. It's fantastic.
I know that.
They're so calm, and it is like, it's a competition, but they're like trying to help each other too. So I appreciate it. It's mellow, right? There's no angst. There's no violence. It's just people baking some shit in a tent in England, and like they have a competition and they're having a great time and they're kind of funny. Binge watch? The only show that I actually watch is the British Baking Show. So I'll binge watch the British Baking Show. Right? There's about 10 seasons right now. I'm waiting for the next season to come out. they had a pandemic season where they brought everybody together, did social distancing and stuff like that, kept it safe. But I'm waiting for the next season to come out. When that comes out, I'll be on board with that too, man.
Step Brothers and British Baking Show.
Yeah, it's good shit.
Is it the accents that get you?
It's wicked funny. It's wicked funny. They get dry humor and like wow. And honestly too, like it's British cooking too. So you're kind of like, like some of the food is not that palatable. It doesn't look that palatable, but you're like, it's fascinating how they get there. And this guy, the producer and actually the host of the show, Paul Hollywood, like picks stuff apart. And you're like, oh, well, I didn't even notice that, Paul. Or you didn't like the way that thyme tasted with the pudding. I'm like, it's fascinating, man. Again, it's passive too. There's no angst, there's no violence, there's no aggression. It's just like you can very easily watch it and just be like, oh, this is pretty cool, man. I'm gonna watch this guy bake some stuff.
That's awesome.
Come around people watching bare knuckle UFC fighting.
Bare knuckle UFC fight. Oh yeah, it's quite different. British Baking Show, UFC, bare knuckle fighting. They're on the same spectrum of entertainment. So funny. Next one, favorite band or musician of all time, and what's your favorite song?
Oh, Bob Marley, man, you can put that stuff on the background. You can listen to that all day.
Slap it a bass. Slap it a bass.
Bob Marley, and then probably off the top of my head, probably Positive Vibration right there, man, because that comes down to a mental state, energy that you're giving off, right? That's probably my favorite song ever. Put that shit on repeat. Just hang out. Shit. Bob Marley, Positive Vibration. You can't go wrong with that, man.
You can't go wrong with that. All right. And then favorite hobby outside of, working out and that sort of stuff. What's your favorite thing to do? Could be family, could be by yourself. What's your favorite thing?
I love, so all of my free time is spent helping with the coaching of the different sports teams that my kids do. My son's into something every day. And again, we try not to overschedule, but after the pandemic, you're like, you know what? I'd rather be doing something than not doing something. So helping with either driving people to practice, helping coaching practice, coaching the games. Same thing with my daughter. It's like, I love spending time watching them play sports. I enjoy that probably more than anything. It's again, sports aren't everything, but what it is, it's a microcosm of life. Like the effort that you put into something, how is that gonna translate to other things? The work that you put into your schoolwork, how you treat people, how well the teammate you are. Again, these are all, again, sports aside, right? They're 12 and 9 years old. No one gets a professional contract at that point, right? And the likelihood is less than half of 1,000th of a percent. But just how you kind of overcome adversity with things and the effort you put into something, and even the practice that you put into something, how that translates onto the field. Same thing with schoolwork, right? You study. How does that translate to how well you do in school, right? So it's a direct indicator, effort, right? So I spend the majority of my free time either driving them places or coaching or helping coach one of their many, many activities. I probably enjoy that more than anything, by far and away.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, Brad, this was a great community conversation. I think we definitely ran over a normal time, but I think it was definitely worth it. So I appreciate you being on community conversation today. I appreciate you spending the time. All those folks that are out there listening right now, I appreciate you tuning in. This is certainly one of the best community conversations that we've done so far. And just make sure you check out every Monday. A new community conversation will be out for all of your entertainment purposes. Check them out on our streaming platforms, on Spotify, also YouTube channel, every Monday to get your week started. So again, Brian, thank you so much for being part of community conversation today, man.
I love it, dude.
Thanks.